Okay, good evening, Marav Rabbi Sai. Tonight's a Tuesday night special. L'kovid Shabbos Kodesh, L'kovid Lila Nishmas the Bas Ayin, whose name is, does it say? Avram Dov Ben David, that's right. A schus for Parnasa and a schus for the following. Sham Yosef ben Rachel, Esther Tzipora Bas Shulamis, Yehuda Aryeleh ben Esther Tzipora, and Yedidya David ben Esther Tzipora. All of them should be Zoichat, Tzlach, and learning, Hashpos, Toivos, Shimshon Chaim ben Menachem Michal. For Shalom Bayis, Atzach B'chol and Yonim, for all of those, and also for Rachel Bas Esther Tzipora and Rivka Bas Esther Tzipora. For Ali Yiddish Kindalach and all those people who join us into these Shiurim, whether you're here with us, as Asher Yeshnai Pai, those who are on Zoom, and those who follow along with Torah anytime, Gans Klal Yisrael, the schus of the Zera Shimshon. Shimshon Chaim ben Menachem Echol.
Also what Tzaddik Nista, Shiur says today, Shlomo Menachem ben Yehuda.
Shlomo Menachem ben Yehuda.
A great uncle of ours.
Okay, page Shin Lamed Tes, Parshas Vayishlach. Medrash, quote, it begins with the words Medrash Yalkut, it's letter Tes. My River Rabbi side. Letter Tes. Medrash on Yalkut in Yeshaya. Now, actually, this Medrash is on Yeshaya in a Haftarah that we read in Parshas Vayikra. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, which is not written in the Zera Shimshon, as to what the Navi was telling Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is being consoled by the Navi Yeshaya. Va'ato Shema Yaakov Avdi Yisrael Bacharti Boy. Hear, Yaakov, my servant. Yisrael Bacharti Boy. Karmar Hashem Oisecha Yitzrecha Mibeten Ye'azrecha. So says Hashem, who created you. Al tira avdi Yaakov, the Yeshurin bacharti boy. Don't be fearful. I have chosen you. Ki etzak mayim al tzama. I will pour water on those who are thirsty. The noizlim. Noizlim is wet water. Nozel al yabosha, on those who are dried out. Etzoik ruchi al zarecha. I will pour my spirit on your children, uberchasi al tzetzoecha, and my blessings on your tzetzoecha, on your tzetzoim, on those that come from you. And then he says the pasuk that the Zera Shimshon is quoting. First we'll do the pasuk, and then you'll see the medrash. Ze yoimer, then Klal Yisrael would say, Ze yoimer lashemoni. Once the water and once the Spirit of Hashem has blessed Klal Yisrael in Golus, people will now perk forward. Ze yoimer lashemoni. One will say, I belong to the Eibishter. Ze yikra b'shem Yaakov. One person will identify himself as Yaakov. One group of people. It's Zeh, meaning there are four groups, as we're about to see. Zeh yichtav yodai l'Hashem. This fellow will inscribe yichtav yodai for the Eibishter. And finally, ub'shem Yisrael yichaneh, and they will be referred to by the name of Yisrael. There are arba kitos. There are four groups that will be awakened because the Eibishter will sprinkle them with his goodness while we're in the Golus. And this will make a huge difference in Klal Yisrael, as we'll soon see in the ganze Welt. Who are these four groups of people? The Medrash that the Zera Shimshon quotes, the Medrash Yalkut, identifies them. Ze yoimer l'Hashem ani v'lo nis'arev bichet. I belong to the Eibishter. That means we're talking about a tzaddik. Lo nis'arev bichet. V'zeh yikra b'shem Yaakov elu geirei tzedek. Those righteous converts will now be identified as Yaakov. Zeyichdav Yodel Hashem, top of the next column. Elu Balei Tshuva. They're the people, those scribers, the ones who inscribe, they're Balei Tshuva. Ubeshem Yisrael Yichaneh Elu Yirei Shamayim. So we have different groups, Balei Tshuva, Yirei Shamayim, Tzadikim, and converts, Gerim. All of them will be reawakened. But the Zera Shimshon wants to understand this name Yaakov. Hooray, we know that in this week's Parsha, after fighting with the Malach adds a name to Yaakov Avinu. He doesn't just change his name, he adds a name. How do I know that he adds? It's actually a discussion in the Gemara in Brachas on Daf Yud Gimel. Avraham, the Gemara says, got changed from Avram to Avraham, and no backsies, you can't change that. However, Yaakov's name, Yisrael, was not the same type of name change. Even though when it says in the Chumash, Lo Ye'amar, your name should not be Yaakov, Ela Yisrael Shemecha. It happens through the angel, and it happens later on through the Eibishter. The Eibishter then confirms that name change. We still find that Yaakov Avinu is not just Yisrael, he's Yaakov as well. And the reason, says the Gemara, is because almost immediately afterwards, the Chumash and Hashem refers to him as Yaakov. What does that mean? That means that Yaakov has two names. We want to understand what that is. The Zera Shimshon will address it tonight as well. Here we're seeing in this Medrash that different groups of Klal Yisrael, some of them are identified as Yaakov, some of them identified as Yisrael. Who? Well, Yisrael is the Yirei Shamayim. They're called Yisrael. And the converts, the Gerim, are Yaakov. Now, asks the Zera Shimshon on this. Yesh ledaktek lama hagerim nikraim b'shem Yaakov ve'ena nikraim b'shem Avraham. Wouldn't you think that the appropriate name of convert should be Avraham? What's that?
The first ger.
He's the first ger. Actually,
Which is what we do now. You've been there from.
exactly, says Rabbi Yitzi, exactly the point, that when we give them a name, their father, they're called Ben Avram, Rishon Legerim, and their mother is Sarah, Rishon for the Giyaris. They're the ones who started Klal Yisrael. When you give an aliyah to a convert, he or she chooses a name. What's their father's name? Right, a cotton, a gersh, and his gairs kekatan shenoi ladam is like a newborn. The teretz is Ben Avram and Ben Sarah. I think I once said over here in this shiur from the Asara Ma'amoros, a grace soid. The Asara Ma'amoros says that when Avram and Sarah for 70 years couldn't conceive, one would think that it's Vasamegaton. So what were they doing? Trying, Segatnish. No. Every time there's a yichud of a husband and a wife, neshamas are created. Shteit Nasar Mamorais, all the souls of all the converts that would come to this world and be born in non-Jewish homes, and then they would come over to Klal Yisrael, all those neshamas were created by Avraham and Sarah during the time that she had not conceived Yitzchak. They were created at that time. The Asar Mamoris. Now, one of the grace of Mekubam, you have to be Soid Hashem Lirev, like my Rebbe Zechariah Baruch would say. And therefore, indeed, it's not just because we don't have anybody to name them after as parents, so we might as well just call them Avram and Sarah. Nay, they're Avram and Sarah's kindolach because Avram and Sarah created this neshama. They brought down this neshama, just didn't have the guf to get in there yet. When they convert, that's when the guf comes together with yet a neshama. So they're true neshama parents in Yiddishkeit is Avram and Sarah. This just makes the Zera Shimshon's kasha even stronger. So why are we identifying these neshamas, these gerim, with Ben Yaakov, why does the Medrash call them Yaakov children when l'chayra, as we're saying now and adding from the Asar Mamars, it's more appropriate to be B'nai Avraham. And not done yet, says the Zera Shimshon asking questions. V'chein kos v'chein, that's why Avraham is called Av Hamoin Goyim. He is the father of all the nations, not just of where he started off. V'chein kosev harav, the Rav Avadia Bar Tanur b'shem a Rambam on a Mishnah in Bikurim that says that when a convert brings fruits, he can't say, when he says, Araimi Oived Avi, right? Who's Avi? Who's Avi? Arami Oived Avi. Yeah, but you come from Avram, right? And you converted. Right? You converted. So Memela, how can say Ba'aretz asher nasata la'avaseinu? You didn't get this land. You weren't part of Yotzei Mitzrayim that came. You just came to Judaism right now. Aretz asher nasata la'avaseinu. But the Rambam says we do not paskin like that stam Mishnah. Ela shager maybe v'koyra mipnei shavram nikra av hagerim, because it's the Aretz asher nasati la'avraham. And Avram is the Ab of Gerim, and Memela, I can give it to them too. V'chein, when we say, 1 second, and when we say Shmona Esrei, and we dive in Elekei Avseinu, Elekei Avraham, Elekei Yitzchak Yaakov, does a convert have the right to say Elekei Yaakov? Can they say that? Yes or no?
According to this?
Yes. Yes, they do. Why? Why do they say that? Says the Zera Shimshon. They can say that because they're misyaches to Avram Avinu, which means they started in the beginning. They started with Avram. Avraham. They should be called Avraham, not Yaakov. That's my kasha, says the Zera Shimshon. I have another kasha, says the Zera Shimshon. It says, if at the top of the page, the nusach of the Navi, he says one group of people was Yaakov and Ze Yichtav Yodei Lashem. He writes his name, Yichtav, it's Ksav Yad, not his name, but his handwriting is to the Eibishter. Those are the Balei Tshuva. Ma inyan Yichtav Yodei and Balei Tshuva. That's another thing I want to know. Those are two separate questions. Be'ezus Hashem, with the time that we have, let's address both of them. Vayishlach. Zog the Zera Shimshon, a fascinating chiddush. Shahagerim nikraim davka b'shem Yaakov. Gerim are known as Yaakov. Why? Lefi shakosev hirzanu kama pamim loisoinu es hager. Don't mistreat a convert. You have to give respect to them. And even more so, v'ahavtem es hager. Where does this come from? Vatam, because as the Torah says, ki gerim hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Because all of you have the same status as gerim as well. The ger loisoinu v'loisilchatzenu ki ger meyisem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You mekenzenish in Yiddish, you would say mekenzenish derikin. You can't squeeze them, right? About the golis shall Mitzrayim hischil mi Yaakov. The golis began with Yaakov, as we know, like it says, the Yaakov ubanov yordu Mitzrayim. Yaakov was the one b'shivim nefesh yordu avasecha Yaakov ubanov, or Logor ba'aretz banu. When Yaakov is talking to Pari, even uses a loshon of ger. We're just here at Logor ba'aretz. Shahayahu rishon leired Mitzrayim. Even though Yosef was there first, Einochanami, but when Yaakov came, Yosef is considered included in part of the Shivim Nefesh, and all of them are now misyaches, and all of them are considered a part of Yaakov's entourage. So the status, says the Zera Shimshon, of Ger amongst Klal Yisrael, our identification, ki geirim hayisu, begins with Yaakov Avinu, says the Zera Shimshon. V'kivan shemachmas golas zeh nimshach lehem toiva she'enon yochol ha'inoisam. The fact that the goodness, and this is the way I understand what the Zera Shimshon is saying, Klal Yisrael was yoitza to goodness then. Klal Yisrael was yoitza then to a Rechush Gadol. Klal Yisrael was yoitza to all of that. Geiris brought good to them. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu links Geirim, ki ger hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim, the way I doubted but took care of you, and the way I loved you, you were Geirim, they're Geirim. You were in Mitzrayim, they were not in Mitzrayim, but they carry the same name as you did. Mishum hachi mishabchem la Hashem b'shem Yaakov v'lei b'shem Avram. Therefore, the identity of a ger, while of course where the neshama comes from is Avram, but we're talking about ve'ahavtem es hager. We're not talking about the identity of the ger. I knew I would get to this, right? Good. Ve'ahavtem es hager. The ahava, the endearment, begins with ki gerim hayisem. Sha'af al pi she'yacholim loymar elokei v'seinu pnei shebnei Avram. Avadim mitzad their yichus, they can say elokei Avram. But mekom mokem no nimshachem shum teva. No necessary good comes from just being elokei Avram. Avram Avinu had a Yishmael, and that Yishmael does not get what we get. And even being b'nei Yitzchak, and Esav doesn't get what we get. You got to be a Ben Yaakov and Yitzchak and Avram in order to get it all. Yishmael's kinderlach, Yitzchak's Esav kinderlach and grandchildren did not get it. These Geirim are getting the identification and the ahava and the endearment of being Bnei Yaakov. Why? Because our own identity began from there. So you were like that, and you enjoyed the goodness of Hashem. So too you have to love a ger as such. One pshat. Let's do a second pshat, and then we'll go to the Balei Tshuva. Take a look on page 2. V'oid yesh loimer. Here he says another reason. V'oid yesh loimer. Shegeirim amar vayikru b'shem Yaakov metam shekosav bal asora mamoris, which is shekol hageirim, every convert minon haven v'nidchu ba'avoin odom harishon machmas haklola shebo la'olam b'ramois hanochash. Odom harishon, this is a very Kabbalistic, Rabbi say. Odom harishon is the tzura, is the form of man that encompasses all of humanity. Jews and non-Jews alike. Every human being in the world, even Chava, originally came from Adam, until she was dissected and became his partner. But all of us come from one man, all of humanity. But then something happened. The Nachash had this, he captured the heart of Chava, convinced her to go against Hashem, and by doing that, he was able to get Adam to identify as Adam Belial, the bad man, no longer the good person. And all of his kids, and Yotzei Chalotzov, while there were some tzaddikim, but look what happens to Cain and Hevel. One brother kills his other. And then the grandson, Enosh, already makes Avodah Zarah. And by the 10th generation, just have Noach Motzachem B'nei Hashem. And it didn't get much better round 2 after the world was recreated, because as we've talked about so much, the Nachash had grabbed a hold of all of these neshamas. When Yaakov Avinu took the brachas from Yitzchak and took the Bechor and took the brachas, says the Zera Shimshon, he stole back some of those neshamas that were taken by the snake. And that's why he had to do it with trickery. He had to beat the Nachash. The way it was taken by the Nachash must be taken from the Nachash. Watch the words inside as they develop. Shekol Hagerim Minon Hava. This comes again from the Mekubal Asar Mamaris, who I quoted earlier. Nidchu ba'avoyin Adam Harishon machmas haklolos shebo lo'ila machmas hanachash. The curses that came to the world. V'nisaknu elu haklolos im habrachos shebo lo'ilam beramous Yaakov. With Yaakov's trickery, the Oz Huchnu neshamas hagem lachsel mekaimam. Without Yaakov stealing those neshamas back from Esav, they never would have become Jewish. They had been hijacked by the Nachash, a real like a real hijack. They were taken away. V'lechein yikru davka b'shem Yaakov. Ki shaloi noto metoicha klipa b'ramos. That's why he's called a heel, because he had to take it like a heel. B'ramos, he had to do a drei cup, like the Nachash mamish. He had to use the koiches of the Nachash, because they were under the spell of the Nachash, and bring them back. V'hachi Kara Shemo Yaakov. So these neshamas are identified with Yaakov Dafka, because I need the Yakveini Pamayim. You have to need the Akivos, means I need the trickery of Yaakov. It's not enough that Avram created these neshamas, even though time-wise, but where are they? They're underneath the koiches of Umais ha'olam. They're by the Gentiles. And if they're going to come back to Klal Yisrael, it needs the power of Yaakov Avinu to bring them back. That, says the Zera Shimshon, is why Davke Yaakov had to impersonate Esav, had to act the way he did in order to schlep aros. And Rabbi Sai, it's not much different than what he had to do with the sheep of Lavan as well, to take that away. Those Tzoyin Kadoshim that represented Klal Yisrael, that he also had to ganva vek. All of Yaakov's blessings were found in the Sitra Achra, were on the other side, because the other side had stolen it from the Chelek HaToiv of Adam Harishon. In the Maral Shir tonight, we're going to discuss how Yaakov Avinu was Shufra de Yaakov Kain Adam. He's taking back what belonged to him. He wasn't somebody else, but he's actually Adam Harishon too, so to speak, taking back what was originally his.
Another reason why he looked like? That's
what it means. Das geht man read. One more point that we need to make over here. We'll go back to Pshin Lamed Tes, the piece that I skipped. The other point, which was the Balei Tshuva, that the Balei Tshuva are the ones who are the scribes. Yichtav Yodei Lashem. Here the Zera Shimshon says something amazing. This that it says that these are the people who Yichtav Yodei Lashem. Eilu Balei Tshuva. It's brought down Shebizman Shahoya Beis HaMikdash Kayam. When we had a Beis HaMikdash, Lo Hoya Ha'olam Asiyat Tzorech Tikun. Now this needs a little bit of an introduction. It's beyond the scope of tonight's shiur, but we'll be yaitza with a 30-second introduction. And that is, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, there were levels of worlds. There's the Olam HaYitzira, Bria, Asiya. Atzilus is higher. That's not necessarily the right order. But the Olam that we live in is the Olam HaAsiya, the world of doing, the world of Maisa. This world, when there's a Beis HaMikdash, is a world that's mitukan. there is Hashrois Hashchina in this world. The Shechina has a place, and the earth is a different place. And as Chazal tell us, especially when it was with Bais Rishon, everybody, the frequency of Kedusha in the world was on such a level that just regular folk could all be Nevi'im. The level of Kedusha was so high that the frequency that we lived on was such a Groisa Madrega that Klal Yisrael, and even the world, if it wasn't Kaiches HaKedusha, unfortunately it was Kaiches HaTum, and there was black magic, the world was totally different. As such, says these Mekubalim, Lo Hoya Ha'olam Asiya Tzorech Tikun. Avol Achar HaChurban Ato Tzorech Tikun. And what is this Tikun? Last line on this page. Who? Kishetalmid Vasik, a Baal Tshuva. When a Talmud or a Baal Tshuva, top of page Shin Mem, Koisev Shum Dva Dover Miyisoidei Torah, writes down something from Miyisoidei, from the Yisoides, that I'm going to translate as foundation, Oz Be'oisoi Ksiva Misaken Oilam Ha'asiya, writing down words of Torah and bringing them into this world through Talmidei Chachamim, and specifically through Balei Tshuva, people who were on the other side, and now bringing their thoughts and their machshavas into Torah and concretizing them and making them into written word, has a tremendous kedusha. How so? V'chein kosev b'sefer Ma'avor Yaboik, also a mekubal. Shekol chidushei Torah shemeshchadshim Yisrael begolas hazeh. Any chidushim that Yidden are mechadish in this golas, asidim heim la'oimram ba'olam haba, shall be uttered in olam haba. Shekain, just like we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, do we? But we still have karbonos. We say it in davening. V'ishe Yisrael usvilosam. When we say Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu b'amcha Yisrael uvisvilosam. V'ishe, the mean says Taisvis, I think it's in Brachas or Chagiga. Taisvis says we're makriv, Klal Yisrael. Those people, the neshamas of Klal Yisrael, those who are meiser nefesh, and those unfortunately who pass away, are like karbonos. Haya oisim afla malakam oishanu oimim ve'isha Yisrael usfilosam ve'im kain tikuna karbonos ve'tikuna chidushim echadhu. What a person does in this world when there is no Beis HaMikdash is in lieu of the fact that although we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but we're able to still bring down Kedusha to this world as though there was one. When a person does writes down Chedushay Torah, and about Tshuva especially, Oisa Tikkun Gomer L'Nishma Soy. Shari Chedushay Torah Heim Shamayim Chadoshim. They are what Chazal referred to in Yeshaya as the new heavens. Vashamayim nivru b'yodeh shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu t'chsev ani Hashem notu shamayim ma'aseh yodeh magad rakia. And about Tshuva, who comes back to Klal Yisrael and writes the Chedushay Torah, has a koyach of making like a new koyach, a new heaven. He quotes this from a Zohar in the beginning of Hakdama LeZohar. I want to read to you what the Zohar says. Shaninu. I'm going to read it to you in the Hebrew Lashon Kodesh translation. B'shah, ba'oisa shah, shedavar Torah mischadesh mapi adam. When a person says a chiddush, when a person says a chiddush in Divrei Torah, hamila hahu, those words, oila, it goes up to heaven, umizdamen lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it presents itself to Hashem. Uma'ater oisoi b'shivim atarais, and it gets crowned with 70 crowns. V'davar chodav she'ischadesh oila v'yoshev al roish tzadik chei oilamim. It sits on the head of whatever this is, tzadik chei oilamim. V'tas misham, and then it flies around. And he continues explaining things which are beyond our pay grade. V'chol oisam yeser divrei Torah shemischadshim oimdim lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They stand in front of Hashem. V'oilim v'nasas artzos achayim, and they become what's known as the source of artzos achayim. V'yordim u'misachem b'oretz u'mechkadesh, and from all of this comes shamayim chadosha v'oretz chadosha. In one place over here he says that the Eibishter is menashek. He kisses these words and they become the source of chiyus of this world. One explanation, just so we can understand, to bring it down. My Rebbe Zechron Levracha explained, there's no such a thing as old life. There's no such a thing as old life. What does that mean, old life? Chiyus is always, every moment, something new. I'll explain. Person takes a breath. You brought oxygen into your lungs. How long will you survive on that breath? 1 second, 2 seconds, till you get the next one. How long can you hold that breath?
10 seconds.
Let's say a minute. And what afterwards?
You gotta breathe. I'm done.
You're done if you don't breathe. Every second we're breathing. Every second the blood in our body is being pumped. If the blood doesn't flow to the entire body at all times, I have a Hatzalah member right over here. He can tell you what could happen. If a person would try to, in your mind, try to understand that I want to live on my life that I was energized a minute ago. It doesn't work that way. Of course not. That means when we said there's no old life, it means say there's no such a thing, that life is not constantly mechadesh bechol yoim tamid maaseh bereshis. The Eibishter renews the world every minute. Why?
Because he's in control. He wills everything to be.
Why does he want it? What's happening in this world? Chaim birtzoinai. Because there's a ratzon. Why is there a ratzon? Why does the Rebbeinu Shalom want? Because we live our lives the way he wants us to live. Because our life reflects a life that the Eibishter has a ratzon for. Because he finds our life a worthwhile life and therefore he invests in it. The Eibishter is so good that even when we mess up our lives and we live a life that's not worth living, he still invests in us. Because he's the ultimate good source. He'll never stop investing in us. But there has to still be a reason. Says the Zera Kadosh, if not for the Torah, imloi brisi yomam v'layla, if not for the covenant that he made with us, that we keep, chukei shemayim v'aretz lo samti, there wouldn't be chukei shemayim v'aretz. The shamayim chadoshim, the ever-newing earth, the ever-newing heaven, are the words of Talmidei Chachamim that are brought down to this world and are concretized. Those are the words that keep the world going. The divrei Torah that we speak, the divrei Torah that we write, the chedushim that we say, we are keeping the world going. When there was a Bais Hamikdash, there was the Scheiner here, and there was a ratzon for the world. The Eibishter was down here with us. When there's no Bais Hamikdash, where is the Eibishter? He's with us too. Because we have the power to do like the Bais Hamikdash, to be metaking the Oretz. Like we talked about last week in Zera Shimshon. Ein zeh Even when there's an Ein Zeh, there's still Noira. There's still Klal Yisrael. Baruch Elokim, Tnu Oiz Elokim. He gives us the strength. And we reciprocate with the strength back to the Eibishter. So says the Zera Shimshon, this is the Koyach that Klal Yisrael, the different groups, when it becomes evident that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when the time comes that the Mashiach will come, and it will be evident of all these different groups, and they're going to pop up. They've always been there. There's always been converts. There's always been Balei Tshuva. There's always been Tzaddik. There's always been Yoreh Shamayim. But sometimes they're not so prevalent because the world isn't willing to accept us. But when the time comes and they're going to identify themselves, and this one's going to say, V'zeh Yomer, as it says in the Navi, and the one is going to say, V'zeh Yomer Lashem Oni, V'zeh Yikra B'Shem Yaakov, V'zeh Yichtav Yodei Lashem, U'B'Shem Yisrael Yechanis. All these people, says the Zera Shimshon, will become identified. Each group, and one of those groups, the one Yikosav Yodei, the ones that were responsible for Torah, they're the ones who have been keeping the world going, and it's thanks to them that there is an Oretz Chadosha. They're those people, when Mashiach comes, will be identified as the ones who kept the world going. The ones who are the Geirim, they're the Yaakov people, says the Zera Shimshon. They're the people who Yaakov Avinu could say, these are the ones I stole from Esau. These are the Vayakvenis. These are the ones who, thanks to me, they were the ones, I was the Gerim, like the Zera Shimshon says. They're around, they identify with me because thanks to me, they're able to be back in Klal Yisrael.